If you enjoy this content, please like and comment to feed the algorithm god. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Let's go to a different time, and an entirely new place for now, to a secluded region of Spain where a pagan religion once thrived. Generations ago, the inhabitants of this region practiced the worship of something called the Plaga. The eggs of these creatures were injected into worshippers or victims of the faith. As the Plaga grew within the host, it would attach itself to the sternum of the human and develop a symbiotic relationship with them. Those who survived the process were called ganados. Much like the Indipaya of Africa and their progenitor flower, the ganados gained superhuman strength and stamina at the cost of their ability to think freely and rationally. The parasite took over, and the human aspect was lost. But amongst the ganados, generally, there was peace. The Plaga was a social and communal parasite with its own form of communication, and the creatures did not wish for their hosts to die, taking great measures to protect them if a threat came near. Much like the worship of the mold in Mother Miranda's village, the worship of the Plaga in this remote region of Spain was considered a pagan faith, but unlike the village of Mother Miranda, this strange religion was not tolerated or overlooked by external forces indefinitely. Sometime within the 15th or 16th century, a man named Salazar led an armed force into the lands of these pagans to cut them down in the name of the Catholic Church. At the end of the slaughter, after much of the population had been killed and burned, Salazar and his men sealed the Plaga under a castle, and he himself took to ruling these lands, establishing the name Salazar as the new ruling line. The cultish practices of the people were fully wiped out, and a sort of normalcy came to the land. But all of that changed a few hundred years later, in the late 1990s. A researcher by the name of Dr. Osmond Sadler heard rumor of an old potential biological weapon hidden away within this distant region of Spain, and he decided to investigate the claim. Osmond Sadler had aspirations of control and dominance, and when he heard stories of the Plaga, he saw in it potential to use it for his own selfish purposes. If the Plaga could be understood, controlled, and weaponized, then the entire world could be brought under his heel. And when he arrived, Sadler read the people of this region like a book, in particular the very young ruler, Ramon Salazar, and he presented himself under the guise of a priestly figure. Ramon Salazar was a young man, no more than 20 years old, whose face betrayed a countenance double that number, but he had the body that seemed half that age. He had no family to speak of, no family elders to keep him in check and offer guidance. The sickly Ramon Salazar was able to be manipulated by Osmond Sadler. The doctor convinced him that he was a prophet and that Ramon needed to make amends for the deeds of his family line, namely the conquering of this area and the suppression of the worship of the Plaga. Ramon Salazar gave Osmond Sadler full access to the sealed-off caves beneath the castle that held the now mummified bodies of the ancient Plaga parasites. Locals were recruited to act as an excavation workforce, and during the excavation, these unlucky locals were infected. The corpses of the Plaga parasites began to emit tiny, barely perceivable spores. Research into the carcasses of the Plaga commenced topside, spearheaded by a doctor named Luis Serra. Luis Serra was a native of the region and quite fell under the manipulative spell of Osmond Sadler. He fully assisted in the research of the Plaga and the study of its possible mutations. As the years passed and the new millennium rolled about, the infected villagers who assisted in the still ongoing excavations began to get sick, which meant almost the entirety of the village. The spores that they had inhaled over the years was the Plaga entering their bodies to use them as incubators for their resurrection. A new generation of ganados was awakening, much to the terror of the village inhabitants. Through his studies, Luis Serra aided in altering and strengthening the Plaga, making them exceedingly difficult to kill through blunt violence, their only true weakness being UV radiation, though it would take a concentrated amount of it just to kill a young Plaga. Trying to kill or remove a fully formed and embedded Plaga parasite would almost certainly kill the host as well. The Plaga began to completely overtake the infected villagers, turning them into almost mindless, shambling hosts that had complete loyalty to their prophet, Osmond Sadler. And so, a new cult sprouted forth called Los Illuminados. Sadler's sojourn into discovering and cultivating the new bioweapon was revealing itself to be quite the success. He was ready to take the next step in his plan, which put a target on the heads of United States leadership. Luis Serra started to kind of resent Osmond Sadler. He no longer believed in the words of the prophet, and he wanted a way out of what was developing. So, In 2004, he emailed an old friend from his college days to get assistance in leaving the region. But instead, it was Ada Wong who received the message. It was extreme happenstance that she did. Louis Serra wasn't aware that his old friend was dead and that Ada Wong was now receiving his messages. In the years following Raccoon City's destruction, Ada Wong continued to work for the mysterious organization, and she still reported directly to the one and only Albert Wesker. But now their attention would be turned to this remote part of Spain where a new bioweapon was being developed. The organization dispatched a soldier named Jack Krauser to the area so that he could integrate into Los Illuminados to gain intel. Jack Krauser had once served on a mission with USS STRATCOM agent Leon Kennedy in South America back in the year 2002. There, Krauser had learned just how truly powerful the Umbrella bioorganic weapons were firsthand, and decided that he wished to pursue this path for himself. He was resentful of Kennedy's position in life, and he felt slighted that he was not a celebrated member of the armed forces, so he decided to become more than just human. After that particular mission, he faked his own death and sought out Albert Wesker, joining him in his mission to collect and understand the many Umbrella viruses loose in the world. Now, Krauser has found himself amongst the Los Illuminados in Spain in 2004. While the prophet Osmond Sadler didn't especially like the walking ego machine that Jack Krauser was, he was a useful man. Sadler gave him a sample of the Plaga parasite, but Krauser didn't deliver it to Wesker. Rather, he secretly pocketed the Plaga. Then, Sadler tasked him with possibly the most important part of his plan for world domination. Sadler ordered Jack Krauser to kidnap the daughter of the President of the United States, Ashley Graham. She was taken to a village near Ramon Salazar's castle and told that she would be returned to her father once a ransom was paid. In response to this crisis, STRATCOM agent Leon Kennedy was dispatched to locate and rescue Ashley Graham, but with almost no intel on the actuality of the situation. As far as Leon Kennedy knew, this was a search and rescue operation, not a fight against bioorganic weapons. From the very start, troubles abound for Leon. Unbeknownst to him, the first local he encounters is infected, and he's forced to kill the man when he turns hostile. His ride and route out of the village are destroyed, and there are no friendly faces to be found here. Once the locals are made aware of his presence, they do not stop in their advances on his position. They do not behave like the T-virus infections of Raccoon City. This is a whole new creature that Leon Kennedy has no insight on how to approach. Deep into the settlement, Leon finds one Louis Serra. Apparently his ploy to get out of the area with the help of Ada Wong completely fell through and he was captured. Lucky for him that Leon came along when he did. Unlucky that he brought Father Bitores Mendez along with him. Father Mendez is a head figure within this community, a Catholic priest who was convinced by Osmond Sadler to act as the mouthpiece to the people of the region on his behalf. This was a major stepping stone in establishing Los Illuminados and bringing the populace into cooperation. And as a reward for his works, Father Mendez was given a specially engineered version of the Plaga that allowed him to retain control over his thought, but gave him all the physical benefits of the infection. Bringing down Leon Kennedy is quite simple, at least for now. In the custody of Osmond Sadler, a Plaga parasitic egg is injected into Kennedy. In time, it will mature enough to hatch and take over his body. He's dumped back in the village with Louis Serra. Though Louis departs as soon as the opportunity presents, Leon fights his way to another part of the settlement where he once again encounters the father. But once again, while he's absolutely capable of raising his hand and causing grievous harm to Leon, he really doesn't. He warns him not to be a bother, acknowledges his Plaga infection, something Leon himself is still unaware of, and he deigns to leave Kennedy to his own devices with naught but a warning to essentially mind his manners. Later in the day, however, the Plaga begins to stir and awaken within him, and remember, the longer the Plaga is allowed to remain, the stronger it becomes within the host, the more dangerous it is to remove it. This sudden eruption of activity within him sends Leon into unconsciousness, where he will remain for a full 6 hours. A gauntlet of obstacles repeatedly halt Kennedy's progress, but eventually he does make it to a church where Ashley Graham is being held. During a brief showdown with Osmond Sadler, who is all too happy to grandstand and lay out the entirety of his plans for the president's daughter, Ashley recalls that she too has been infected with the Plaga. Though they don't quite realize the implications of it, it makes the search for answers to what it is and a cure for it absolutely mandatory. But Leon continues to show himself as a poorly mannered guest in these lands, finally drawing the ire and the violence of Father Bitores Mendez, who corners him in a run-down barn with lethal intent. He's had quite enough of Leon's behavior, and the plaga within him is just primed and ready for such an event. But ultimately, Leon manages to prevail and bring down Father Mendez, retrieving his false eye in the process, a key of sorts that will allow Ashley and Leon passage from the village into the castle of Ramon Salazar, which, thankfully, lies not too far up ahead. Within the castle are hordes of Los Illuminados defending the grounds, but so too is Luis Serra, and he carried with him something that would stop the effects Leon and Ashley were experiencing due to the plaga. But oh goodness, he lost it in his retreat from the Los Illuminados that were hunting him. He promises to seek it out and to bring it to them, as his guilt for their situation is beginning to weigh on him. Making their own way through the castle grounds, the duo come in contact with the sickly and plaga-infected Ramon Salazar himself. He's a complete pawn of Osmond Sadler, and makes it abundantly clear that he doesn't care about Leon. They need Ashley Graham for their own scheming, and Mr. Kennedy doesn't factor into anything other than a problem. This place is a nightmare of death traps for the two to survive. At times, they even have to do so separately. Ultimately, Leon loses custody of Ashley Graham, who was delivered to the clutches of Ramon Salazar for safekeeping. Leon must once again find her and rescue her. But oh my, look at who has crossed Leon's path once again. It's been 6 years since Raccoon City, and Ada Wong is still as questionably dressed as ever. She's had her own ventures through Salazar's castle, looking for Luis Serra and dodging her own obstacles, but it's led her here to playfully contend with her old pal for a moment. But ever the tease, she of course reveals very little about her affiliation with Albert Wesker and what she's doing here, instead choosing to tell him that she'll see him around, and peacefully leaves him to his own devices. While Luis is able to retrieve the treatment that Leon and Ashley would need for the plaga, he is unable to deliver to Leon a sample of the perfected plaga to take back to America to raise the alarm. His life is ended by Osmond Sadler, and the supposed prophet of Los Illuminados takes the plaga with him. But before Luis passes, he gives Leon the drugs that he and Ashley will need to suppress the growth of the plaga within them. It will buy them more time at least. At the end of the madness of this place, at the finale of this seemingly endless nonsensical horror show of a castle, is a delightful cherry on top. Ramon Salazar, in all his plaga-infested glory, no longer an angry, sickly man contained within a vessel far too small. He's a sweeping amalgam of fleshly tentacles and a horrid maw, but perhaps this is a dreamy ascension for Ramon, as is the way of these things in the end. Leon is the victor in this arena. Ramon Salazar, the last of his family's name, is killed in his own home, one less obstacle in Leon's path to Osmond Sadler. The prophet ran off to an island fortress where for many years, under the direction of Sadler, research into the plaga took place. Ashley Graham was also taken here, under guard someplace within the compound. Thankfully, it's Miss Ada Wong who arrives to assist Leon. So maybe she does like him after all. Albert Wesker rather wants Leon killed, but she convinced her boss to let him make trouble for Los Illuminados instead, to help make their jobs easier. She sees him to this island fortress and unceremoniously ditches him to go her own way to see to her own affairs, namely getting that plaga sample that Osmond Sadler took from the dying Luis Serra. And this island is a whole new hellscape of trouble and frustration. Thankfully, Leon finds Ashley not too long after his arrival, and his only obstacle is reaching her. Which is kind of a funny statement, haha, isn't it, given what terrible experiments roam the halls of this once research facility. But eventually, Leon does find the young woman. Through the waste disposal, they find their way out and then up to where Osmond Sadler himself awaits. But it's been long enough that the small plaga within the bodies of both Leon and Ashley respond to his command. Ashley, more so. Sadler takes the girl, once again, and though Leon cannot physically force himself to follow, he ensures that he can at least track her to end this sick game of chase. But first, the order comes down from Albert Wesker for Leon Kennedy to be killed. He has had quite enough. And Wesker does not give this order to Ada Wong. She's made far too many excuses for Leon and proven unwilling to kill the man. Instead, the order is given to Jack Krauser to carry out the murder, and Jack has a history with Leon. He quite dislikes the Stratcom agent, and Jack Krauser has infected himself with a Plaga parasite. He would have proven to be a tough fight before, but now he has a distinct advantage over the unsuspecting Leon Kennedy, and the hostility between the two is quite immediate. Some fancy knife work between the two sets the stage for what's inevitable between them, but Ada Wong intrudes to stop their conflict, at least for now. A long trek through winding tunnels, desolate ruins, and vicious Plaga eventually lead to that reunion. Now shirtless and wholly infected, Jack Krauser demands the attention of Kennedy in a battle of ultimate manliness, in a war of direct gunshots to the face and a unique, coy game of hide-and-go-seek. Only one may be the victor here. Some problems just cannot be worked out with smooches and cuddles, and once again, it is Leon Kennedy who wins the day. Jack Krauser was desperate for recognition and to be greater than he actually was, but in the end, that folly just landed him in a pile of rubble. Osmond Sadler now keeps Ashley Graham in slumber, under control, and Sadler has had repeated opportunities to stop Kennedy, but has consistently failed to actually seal the deal. Is that on purpose? Is it laziness, or perhaps ineptitude? Ada Wong once again intervenes in Leon's fight to give him a chance to get away with a now fully awake Ashley Graham. And once again, Osmond Sadler really whiffs it, and he fails to stop them, even though they're literally right there. They're right there, and we know he has tentacle arms under his robe. Okay, hold the sass, take a breath. Within the final stretch of the research facility, the duo finds the equipment set up to kill immature Plaga within a newly infected host. Removal of the parasite brings them one massive step closer to being home free. Now, it's the Prophet who needs to be dealt with. Killing him will bring down the whole operation. Seems that he arrived just in time to save the girl, too. Leon finally gets to return and assist to Ada Wong. And now Osmond Sadler shows us his true face. And oh, it's the face that only a mother could love. Just look at that smoocher. I know, contain yourself. It's just so spicy, but we can't get caught up in the moment, can we? It's time for the final fight, the do or die. The fight carries on through repeated stabs to the eyes, but for old time's sake, Ada Wong does Leon one more solid favor. A rocket launcher sent with love. And it's more than enough to bring down this Tyrant Series wannabe. Enough to finally end this Plaga madness. There is still the matter of that Plaga sample, however, and though Ada has spared Leon repeatedly in the past day, it might not be a good time to push that goodwill. She wants that sample, and he hands it over to her with little fight. In probable good practice, Ada initiates a bomb countdown to blow the entire facility sky high, but very kindly leaves Leon and Ashley the keys to her jet ski as she hightails it out of there on a fancy helicopter. I mean, there's more than enough room for two people on that thing, but I guess the jet ski is better than nothing. It gets them away in time to avoid the blast. I hope they didn't try to travel all the way across the ocean on that thing. In the aftermath of the Plaga, things went quiet for some time. Smaller, clandestine, more contained events propelled things forward, with bioterrorism attacks accenting the harrowing silence. But the company TriCell became more powerful and more dependent on the works of Albert Wesker. He was the power center for all of their bioweapon projects and discoveries, the man with the plan. In 2006, BSAA agents Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine discovered where Oswell E. Spencer, one of the founding fathers of Umbrella, was hiding out. The two infiltrated his vast estate, but rather than finding Spencer, they found a very jacked Albert Wesker. He's lethally empowered via his T-virus infection at this point. He arrived here before the BSAA team and personally took care of Oswell E. Spencer himself, giving the deranged man a rather poetic death that he deserved. The confrontation between the two parties ended with the capture of Jill Valentine, though Chris Redfield believed both Wesker and Jill to be dead at the finale. In actuality, Albert Wesker placed Jill Valentine into stasis in an Africa research facility, where she was infected with a strain of the progenitor virus. During the 1998 Raccoon City event, Jill Valentine had been vaccinated against the virus. Her body was able to fight off this new strain, making her all the more impervious to the progenitor virus variants. She was repeatedly infected with strains of the virus, and the antibodies her body created were used to engineer more stable versions of it. This was a paramount aid in the project developing a whole new progenitor variant, the Ouroboros virus. Ouroboros was less potent, less apt to kill its host, but still a vicious virus, a truly terrifying combination of characteristics that made it perhaps the most fearsome virus to date. Jill Valentine was eventually taken out of stasis and fitted with a device that continually administered a drug called P30, a concoction that would keep her free will suppressed and make her a weapon in the arsenal of Albert Wesker. Chris Redfield struggled with the loss of his BSAA partner. He didn't want to believe that she was truly dead, and he continued to search for answers, sometimes quite recklessly. He was a central figure in the BSAA, and in 2009 he received intel that led him to Africa to investigate an arms dealer named Ricardo Irving, who was suspected of having bioweapons. There he met with a new partner, a BSAA agent named Sheva Alamar. Sheva would act as Chris's guide about the area and a combat companion, an invaluable knowledge source in the journey that was absolutely essential to the search. This region, within a country called Kijuju, was destabilized due to suspected bioterrorism, and unbeknownst to the BSAA, the locals where Chris Redfield was dispatched to were infected with something, a newer version of the plagas that Leon Kennedy had encountered some 5 years prior, courtesy of the monsters at Tricell. On the ground, it is tense. The symptoms of something deeply wrong are on display. Chris and Sheva meet up with their equipment handler and a mission detailer named Renard Fisher, who orders them to meet with the BSAA Alpha team already on the ground. Fisher warns them of Ouroboros, that rumors of its doomsday potential are not incorrect, and that the arms dealer, Ricardo Irving, is the only lead on the project. In the quiet in the streets, it does not last long. Locals already infected with the plagas are actively spreading the parasite into others by force. Once Sheva and Chris come across that first sign of trouble, of a plagas being implanted into a victim, the dam breaks wide open. Just as Leon Kennedy faced once upon a time in Spain, Chris and Sheva must now combat hordes of descending plagas-infected victims and fight their way through to the Alpha team. Renard Fisher is publicly executed once the mayhem begins. The Alpha team begins to take losses before reaching the rendezvous point, ultimately being wiped out. And Chris and Sheva are barely surviving the waves of infected blocking their path, but another BSAA team makes contact with them at the height of a violent confrontation, the Delta team, led by a man named Josh Stone, the soldier that trained Sheva, but more akin to a brother than a commanding officer. He hands off intel related to the locations of the arm dealer Ricardo Irving, and gives Chris Redfield a PDA with footage of a still living Jill Valentine on it. Further insight is obtained here as to what happened to the locals and how it relates to the plaga. Whoever released the plaga into the populace knew that the BSAA would be entering the area, and the terror these people were experiencing was all for the sake of obtaining data on the plaga's effectiveness as a weapon against trained soldiers, very akin to what took place in 1998 at the Spencer Mansion in the Arklay Mountains. It's a long trek, but eventually Sheva and Chris do track down the arms dealer Ricardo Irving, and he is a righteous piece of shrill work. The only reason he makes it out of the confrontation is because a Wesker-controlled Jill Valentine interrupts the showdown and retrieves the cackling idiot. Documents left in Irving's wake point to an oil field in some far-off marshlands where more activity is taking place. It's their new target, and thankfully they won't have to travel the bulk of the distance on foot. A Delta team member arrives with a transport they will use to fight their way across the plains of the region. And at nightfall, more fiendish monsters and abominations rear their ugly heads, ghoulish monstrosities that have felled parts of the Delta team, thinning the allies that Chris and Sheva have to call upon in the area. Sheva's senses tell her that this situation has become far too widespread and lethal for the BSAA forces that are still remaining. It's time to retreat and acknowledge that this mission is FUBAR. She's certainly correct, but when Chris explains that his old partner, Jill Valentine, could be here and could possibly be recovered, Sheva doesn't hesitate in following him into the fray. The flooded plains of this region mark the beginning of the Indipaya territory, and they too have been subjected to a type of plagas. Having been conned and coerced into accepting the parasite, much of the tribe has been wiped out at this point. Those that Chris and Sheva do come across are under plaga control and are devastatingly hostile to outsiders. The Delta Team captain, Josh Stone, is able to further direct Chris and Sheva to where Ricardo Irving was heading, a nearby Tricell-owned dock where a boat awaits him for pickup. The walking turd dumpling of an irritation hightails it from the scene, even though Chris very clearly yelled at him to wait. The docks are rigged to explode, as all docks typically are. But Delta Captain Josh Stone was able to point out a set of boats nearby to Chris because we all know Chris has very poor eyesight and refuses to wear his glasses. But before Chris and Sheva are able to reach Irving's boat, Jill Valentine confronts the sniveling man, demanding to know what he plans on doing about his pursuers, or is he just going to let them follow him about everywhere? With no convincing answer beyond "I'll handle it," Jill presents Irving with a gift of sorts. From xXSiLeNtScReAmXx, a way to handle them, his own Plagas injection. But it seems that xXSiLe didn't send the good stuff for Ricardo Irving. It's an immediate and volatile transformation into something not meant to be invulnerable. Even in this form, Ricardo Irving is not enough to stop the BSAA. And to seal the deal on the stupidity of the Chodeman, he monologues precisely where Chris and Sheva need to go next and that they're on the right path for tracking down Ouroboros. He really sticks it to them in his death throes by revealing valuable information, as all good villains do. The cave that Irving directed them towards was previously traversed by Jill Valentine and leads into the heart of ancient Indipaya territory. There are traps, threats, confrontation, but deeper into the cave system, it's finally found. The progenitor flower in its native habitat, the source of Umbrella's many viruses were long ago Brandon Bailey and James Marcus studied, now left partially derelict, covered in echoes and monsters of the past in the sanctum of the old facility, where now Tricell is starting to play under the direction of Albert Wesker. Just beyond the Outlier Research Facility is another of Tricell's great evils, a massive storage chamber lined with hundreds of test victims in stasis, where Jill Valentine was too once held, and where a great beast lurks to seek out these intruders. Another monstrous Plaga creation acts as a guard dog. But even this Plaga type lacks the survivability to be an unstoppable weapon. It is able to be sent back into the shadows of the facility by the BSAA agents. But the relief of the victory is short-lived when the capsule supposedly containing Jill Valentine is brought out, completely empty. And xXSiLeNtScReAmXx decides to make her presence known, rather brazenly telling them that they should leave. Though the whole point of the call is rather unclear and only really cements the guilt of Tricell as part of the global pharmaceutical consortium. But who am I to question the logic of such things? I'm sure that there was really a point to it all. And soon after, Chris's radio picks up xXSiLe having a conversation with Albert Wesker. 10 out of 10, Mrs. Gione, and now Chris knows that Albert Wesker is also still alive. xXSiLe quickly plays her next hand, cornering Sheva and Chris into a room with a live display of what Ouroboros is. This isn't a new weapon to fuel global bioterrorism. It's not a tool of profit. Rather, it's the culmination of Albert Wesker's lifelong search for something greater than Oswell E. Spencer was ever able to create. The answer to what would spur on the next stage in human evolution to those that were compatible with the Ouroboros virus. It's what would make mankind more like himself. xXSiLeNtScReAmXx was all too happy to aid in this endeavor with the hopes of standing beside him to rule over this new changed world. But now is a demonstration of just how dangerous even a failed Ouroboros infection can be. It takes repeated, direct firepower and explosives just to stop this one new failed infection. But it's pure insight into how desperate the fight against the Ouroboros is going to have to be. After this bout, and not far away, xXSiLe greets Chris and Sheva with no barrier between them, though in the protective presence of the drugged and controlled Jill Valentine, who will not allow anything to happen to xXSiLe. And finally, Albert Wesker is here as well, in all his leather daddy glory, but he doesn't waste a lot of time monologuing his ghoulish plans for Ouroboros. This seems like rather a fun opportunity for Wesker, a chance to stretch his legs, a supposed fair fight 2 on 2, for at least a while, for as long as he has to tarry about with his old pal, about 7 minutes. But while Wesker does have to eventually step out and take a phone call to conduct his business, he graciously leaves behind Jill Valentine to entertain the duo. Her resistance to this, however, even now, is a catalyst to Wesker deciding that it was probably better to amp up the drug dosing from the device on her chest and just let her suffer the process out in the presence of her old BSAA partner. Whatever happens, happens. It's not really of consequence to Albert Wesker anymore. But Sheva focuses the confusion of all of this into getting the thing off of Jill, ripping it out if need be, trying to save her if at all possible. Perhaps she need not die as Albert Wesker perhaps deemed her fate. And that device is so firmly planted into Jill Valentine that it's almost enraging how much pulling and grappling it takes to get it to detach, which I guess is the point. It's not meant to come off. Fair enough. Jill's poor sternum, though. She will survive this, but her survival doesn't mean anything if Ouroboros is released. Her well-being at this point is not the focus of what Chris and Sheva should be pursuing. It's Albert Wesker who must be stopped now. In this moment, he is the greatest single threat to the continuation of mankind, and he's boarding a ship with xXSiLeNtScReAmXx at his side. This is the beginning of the final pursuit. Everything depends on this night. The ship is crawling with plaga-infested monstrosities. Reaching Wesker and Excella is a slow, dangerous process. And they actually find Excella alone, no one to defend her, retrieving a case of something marked PG-67AW. It's an antigen created from the progenitor virus to keep the T-virus infection in Albert Wesker under control. It's a very precise formula and dosing. Sure, it would be a shame if Excella dropped a case of it and left a few doses of it in the custody of Sheva, wouldn't it? Would also be a shame if Excella got dosed with the Ouroboros by Wesker, only, oh dear, to be incompatible with it. It appears that in this new world she so desired to create, Excella herself would not be deemed worthy to be a part of it. The Ouroboros virus changes her into something monstrous and unsightly that feeds off the corpses on the deck and thrashes through the ship to reach the fleeing agents. The threat she now presents clearly cannot be ignored. The ship is going down, and whatever Excella has become is not going to just let them leave. It takes direct shots from a satellite laser weapon to end the beast. Though, honestly, being real, I bet a rocket launcher could have done that in one shot. Where the hell is Ada Wong when you need her? Albert Wesker is preparing to depart, but the man is nigh invincible. They've already faced off against him once. As Wesker is right now, he physically cannot be stopped. But Miss Jill Valentine happens to know a thing or two about Wesker, and she knows that he needs regular injections of that PG-67 serum to maintain stability of the virus within him. Too much could act as a poison in his system and create some sort of vulnerability. Thankfully, xXSiLeNtScReAmXx had delivered extra doses to them before her unfortunate ascension into Super Blob Monster. And now, biggest obstacle in that plan is, well, Wesker is a slippery ninja flippy leather daddy, and he's hard to pin down, and rocket launchers are only mildly effective in slowing him. But through the power of explosives, teamwork, and friendship, Chris and Sheva managed to halt Wesker long enough to give him an extra dose of PG-67 and start the process of truly stopping this deranged man. Even while destabilizing, Wesker is far from defeated and will not concede anything so long as he can still function. The plan is to launch Ouroboros into the atmosphere, but he doesn't make it off the tanker without Chris and Sheva making it on board his plane. He's already turning more feral, more enraged and uncontrolled. Wesker just can't contain his abject anger and engages the two in the freight area of the ascending weapon. In this conflict, the cargo doors are opened and the plane begins to depressurize. All he had to do was wait 5 minutes to launch Ouroboros, but Wesker was playing a hand in completely undoing his own work. And then the plane is brought down into a goddamned volcano. Yeah, sure. Okay, you know what? Yeah, fuck it, let's do this. Wesker takes the Ouroboros virus unto himself, turning him into something altogether new, vile and highly interested in the death of Chris Redfield. It's minutes of gunfire, fleeing, explosives, boulder punching, and obstacle dodging, all just to survive against this tyrant-akin humanoid that refuses to lay down and die. It's the destabilization of the volcano's interior, the rocks that they walk on, that is required to halt his onslaught. Though even a lava bath is questionable in its effectiveness. Delta Captain Josh Stone and Jill Valentine arrive for extraction, and Wesker refuses to allow this to take place. It takes double rocket launcher action into a lava bath to hopefully kill Albert Wesker. And with his demise, so too comes the end of Ouroboros. The Pandora's box of bioterrorism did not close with the death of Albert Wesker in 2009. The terrible deeds of Oswell E. Spencer begot a legacy of clandestine groups and organizations that benefited from war and confusion. Particularly in America, troubles continued to brew in the aftermath of Umbrella, but always from the shadows. An influential man named Derek Simmons, born of an ultra-powerful bloodline and the head of an organization called The Family, saw power to be gained in the void left by the pharmaceutical giant. Simmons held positions of power within the government over the years and played a major role in Raccoon City's destruction in 1998. That is, if you believe the retcons of legend. According to these tales, Ada Wong had been in the city under his order. He was obsessively enamored with her, and when she ditched him for greater opportunities, he was unwilling to abandon his obsession with her. He harbored those thoughts for years. Simmons' position of power within the family and within the U.S. government gave him direct access to little Sherry Birkin as she grew up. He even acted as her legal guardian. Samples would be taken from the girl over the years. Her blood contained traces of the G virus. Under his order, according to the retcons of fable, that is, a whole new line of research into the G virus, the T virus, and the T Veronica virus began. A young woman named Carla Rodamez led the effort, trying to create for Derek Simmons a new progenitor virus. Soon into her employment, Carla Rodamez became infatuated with the man. The genius young woman quickly developed a virus prototype, calling it the chrysalid virus, or the C virus. In an effort to gain his attention, Carla steered her research in the direction of modified cloning. Using the unique malleable properties of the C virus, the genetic makeup of a subject could be rewritten. Derek Simmons wanted his own Ada Wong, so that is where the project was redirected towards, with unlimited resources provided by The Family. Using Ada Wong's genetics as a blueprint, thousands of people were used as test subjects over the course of a decade, creating ghastly monstrosities and beasts. None were genetically similar enough to the original Ada Wong to be a successful copy. In the end, by happenstance, it was Carla Rodamez herself who held the most potential as a genetic copy of Ada Wong. And when Derek Simmons discovered this, he put immense pressure on Carla to comply as a test subject. Wanting to please Simmons, she agreed. Sometime before the year 2010, Carla Rodamez became the clone of Ada Wong, with all of her personality and intelligence to boot. The only difference between the original Ada and this clone was that the copy was completely enamored with Derek Simmons. She served as a valued enforcer and a planner in his shady dealings, a partner. But over time, the old Carla began to surface, and she became furious over what Simmons had done to her. After the death of Albert Wesker in 2009 and after the completion of the Ada Wong cloning project, the now young woman, Sherry Birkin, became a government agent under the direct command of her once legal guardian, Derek Simmons. Sherry was normal for the most part. The G virus had remained suppressed in her body, but she had regenerative healing abilities and a drive to ensure that what happened in Raccoon City when she was a girl was never allowed to happen again. But in 2012, the family and the U.S. government became aware of an offspring of Albert Wesker. Seems that Wesker liked to tank and spank too. He had a son that he was never made aware of. Jake Mueller was his name, and it was hypothesized that he naturally produced antibodies that could fight against the progenitor viruses, including the C virus. The U.S. government wanted him so that these antibodies could be used in vaccine research. The family wanted him to further their research into the C virus. In December of 2012, Sherry Birkin was dispatched to Edonia, where Jake lived and fought alongside the Edonia Liberation Army as a mercenary for hire. Before she reached Jake, the Ada Wong clone, now more akin to her original self, Carla Radames, arrived in Edonia and gave all of Jake's unit doses of the C virus, telling them that they were nutrient injections instead. Already, much of the Edonia Liberation Army was infected with this new virus and held in secret massive ultraviolet C virus BOWs. Jake did his injection and was not impacted by the virus, confirming that he was indeed immune to the progenitor variants. The rest of his unit was not so lucky. Those who were infected began to tear others apart, just like so many others in the Liberation Army who were already infected. And all this in the middle of a combat zone. Sherry Birkin did eventually make contact with Jake Mueller, and he agreed to return to America so long as he got a payout of $50 million for doing so. Yeah, sure, good luck with that, bud. Meanwhile, another story is getting underway, that of Chris Redfield, who's also in Edonia, fighting against the bioorganic weapons now spreading through the Edonia Liberation Army. In the years since his venture into Africa with Sheva Alamar, the now Special Ops Captain of the BSAA has made the acquaintance of Leon Kennedy and developed a friendship with the U.S. agent. Year after year, Chris faced deployment to combat the fires of bioterrorism, gradually becoming more and more numb to the terrors that it brought. Edonia was another deployment to handle BOWs sprouting up, though it was especially bad here. The C virus-infected soldiers are intelligent and capable of weaponized combat. They're not mindless zombie hordes running into gunfire. To make matters even worse, 2 of the Edonia Liberation Army's massive bioorganic weapons were deployed into the zone. During the mission, Chris meets Sherry Birkin and Jake Mueller, with BSAA soldier and Redfield's right-hand man Piers Nivens recognizing him as a wanted insurgent. They all fight together in the city against encroaching C virus-infected soldiers and the massive BOWs thrashing about the city, after which Sherry asks of Chris to allow her to take custody of Jake Mueller so that she can see him escorted back to the United States, and Chris honors her request. His sister, Claire Redfield, has told him quite a bit about Sherry Birkin, and he will extend to her professional respect by not interfering with her mission. The BSAA has other things to worry about anyways, namely investigating and combating this BOW outbreak. In the City Hall building, the BSAA team meets the Ada Wong clone, Carla Radames, though she identifies herself as Ada Wong. At this point, Carla is in full sabotage revenge mode against Derek Simmons and submits to Redfield the name Neo Umbrella, the organization supplying the rebels with their bioweapons and resources fueling the war. She's not lying either, she's just omitting that she herself is the one behind Neo Umbrella, as a tactic to ruin Derek Simmons and bring chaos into the world. Introducing Chris Redfield and the BSAA into the equation would be advantageous. She can manipulate them all the way back to Derek Simmons himself and really smoke the man out of the shadows. They can do her dirty work for her. The foundation is already set. This supposed Ada Wong accompanies the group for a short time. It's far too dangerous even for her to try to make it through the zone alone. The C virus infections are far too widespread and extremely dangerous. And as a thanks for this escort, Carla traps part of the BSAA team and infects them with the C virus. Only Redfield and Piers are spared the attack, and that is only by pure luck. They have to watch as the men that they fought alongside all this time are turned into C virus beasts, monsters that Redfield just does not have the heart to open fire upon. Piers is able to pull Redfield out and reach extraction, but this is a loss to the hardened heart of Chris Redfield that he won't be able to just shake off. More troubles abound for Sherry and Jake as well. The chopper carrying them out of Edonia is brought down in the mountains, forcing them to make their way out on foot. It's a long trek over the course of a bitterly cold night, but at daybreak they do find civilization. They also find, Carla, waiting for them at the base of the mountain. It was this Neo Umbrella organization that brought them down. Carla has beaten both the family and the U.S. government in securing custody of Jake Mueller and his magical antibody blood. It's her pleasure to inform Jake of his father's identity and the reason for his soon-to-be imprisonment. His blood could either save the world in the right hands or ruin it in the wrong. About 6 months later, at the end of June in 2013, U.S. President Adam Benford informed Derek Simmons, who publicly served as the administration's national security advisor, of his intention to disclose to the world the U.S. government's involvement with Umbrella Pharmaceuticals and with the destruction of Raccoon City in 1998. It was an attempt at transparency, at mending bridges between foreign powers, and a strengthening of alliances in the ongoing war on bioterrorism. Simmons was extremely against this, of course, because he had a hand in the destruction of the city, and because he too is secretly engaged in the study of old Umbrella viruses. He would do anything to keep it a secret, even plot the assassination of a U.S. president. Simmons ordered that a troubled CIA agent named Helena Harper be brought into the Secret Service. She was on the brink of being fired for repeated instances of professional misconduct, making her an easy and malleable target. Helena Harper and her sister were kidnapped by the family, and under threat of murdering her sister, Helena agreed to participate in a plot to kill the president, to cause a distraction that would lead to a moment of vulnerability for the president. The day of the announcement at Ivy University, President Benford informed the now head figure within the Division of Security Operations, Leon Kennedy, of his intention to disclose. Kennedy had, over the years, become a trusted friend of the president, more than just a DSO agent on the payroll. As preparations were made for the speech to commence, Helena Harper claimed that an assassin was intending to attack the president, causing on-site security to search the grounds, therefore lessening security around the president himself. Simultaneously, Derek Simmons ordered C-virus-infected creatures be loosed in the building, and very quickly infections began to spread. Helena regretted her involvement and tried to call forces back to the president's side to protect him, but it was far too late. The damage was done. President Benford was infected with the C-virus, and a devastated Leon Kennedy was forced to put him down. Along with the guilt-racked Helena Harper, Kennedy makes it out of the university. She is very insistent that they venture to Tall Oaks Cathedral, but refuses to explain why. The C-virus is now spreading through the area like wildfire. Intent on searching out who was responsible for this attack, Leon works with Helena Harper and makes it through the city, then eventually under it by way of the Tall Oaks Cathedral, where labs and holding areas belonging to the family lay. Helena becomes more frantic the deeper they go, extremely worried about the well-being of her sister. But she is still unwilling to tell Leon all she knows of Derek Simmons and her own involvement with the death of the president. The two discover a videotape labeled "Happy Birthday, Ada Wong." Leon has quite a history with Ms. Wong. Of course, this is of interest to him. The tape is the emergence of Carla Radames, emerging from her chrysalid as the clone of Ada Wong, though there's no context as to what's going on here. It really just looks like a butt-naked Ada Wong jumping out of a cursed birthday cake. Helena's sister is still here, which is initially a relief for the frantic agent, but Simmons never intended to uphold his end of the bargain with Helena. Her cooperation didn't mean anything. She and her sister were never meant to survive the night. Helena's sister was infected with the C-virus, and Helena's denial of the situation isn't going to change that fact. Something that the real Ada Wong acknowledges and steps in to assist with. This woman must be killed. But oh, Ada Wong, just where the heck did you come from? Well, Derek Simmons, for some reason, created a circumstance to inform Ada Wong all about Jake Mueller and Sherry Birkin and their plans to halt the creation of a vaccine. And then Carla Radames herself explains how Simmons had a clone of Ada and she was going to take the blame for the fallout of the C-virus, and it's all just so... Oh my gosh. Anyways, the real Ada is here to do her own investigation. Running into Leon was just a nice little surprise. The temporary trio kill Helena's sister by dropping the nigh unkillable C-virus BOW a few feet, and then they call it good. After which, Helena finally spills the beans on who she is and what she's done. But all of this is just too much drama for Ada Wong, and she's forced to depart from the whole affair. She has her own issues to handle and zero time to finish her sentences. Simmons himself makes contact with the duo, as he seems to be fond of playing his hand out to people who could present as opposition to his plans. Kennedy and Harper are named as suspects in the murder of the president, making their return to the DSO impossible. They're on their own now, and partners, whether they like it or not. Their route out from underneath the city is long and convoluted, but at dawn, they're at least able to greet the rising sun mostly intact. The city of Tall Oaks will not be so lucky. The area is being sterilized, just like Raccoon City 15 years prior. All evidence of what took place gone with it. Leon's old pal and work partner, Ingrid Hannigan, is able to make contact after the Simmons debacle and informs Leon of another C-virus attack taking place in China, where Derek Simmons is en route via a private jet. Though she doesn't have enough insight to connect everything back to him, Hannigan sees through the scheme being crafted by the National Security Advisor. Hannigan files paperwork falsifying Leon and Helena's deaths to give them enough breathing room to leave the country. Their next stop is China. Chris Redfield struggled immensely after the Adonia incident and the loss of his men. He snuck away from hospital after the mission and decided to go missing. By the time the president was killed in June of 2013 back in America, Chris Redfield had become a drunken shadow of his former self. His life in the BSAA had caught up with him, and to cope with all of it, he just drank himself into a stupor and blocked it all out. But Piers Nivens spent those 6 months searching for his old BSAA captain. The C-virus had reappeared in China and there was work to be done. Just the same as Leon Kennedy and Helena Harper, the BSAA departed for China. Jake Mueller and Sherry Birkin spent those 6 months between December and June in custody of Neo Umbrella within China. Jake was used as an antibody source to further enhance the C-virus during that time. It was an opportune moment of laxness on behalf of his guards that gave Jake the chance to shoot his way out of confinement and find a miraculous switch that unlocked every door in the facility, making it possible for Sherry Birkin to also make her escape. The two make contact and dress to leave, giving Jake the opportunity to really put his poor attitude on display in regards to his father's identity, believing that the foul nature of Albert Wesker was passed on to him. But he's saying this to the daughter of William and Annette Birkin, the minds behind the horrific G-virus, and she very easily puts him in his place and tells him to take responsibility for his own actions. His father had nothing to do with it. It seems that Wesker Jr. has a bit of a daddy issue and a loathing towards the man that he never knew. Jake and Sherry, Leon and Helena, and Chris and Piers are now all parties soon to collide in the city called Weiyi. Leon and Helena are able to board a transport to China, but an unfortunate C-virus outbreak takes place on the plane, once in Chinese airspace. Fortunately, the plane just so happens to land in the exact city they need to be, taking them right over the head of Ada Wong and about 10 feet away from Jake and Sherry, who are en route to meet with the evil Derek Simmons. Wow, talk about coincidences! Sherry is unaware that her superior and former legal guardian is the driving force behind the C-virus and is righteously confused when Leon names him as their target. But Leon saved Sherry's life back in Raccoon City. They're longtime friends and she trusts him. Leon's words are enough to make her question her mission. A bargain bin C-virus tyrant halts the two teams' discussion for a while, and then ends up splitting them apart. But before leaving, Sherry informs Leon of exactly where Simmons is at. Putting out his own series of fires jogs the memory of Chris Redfield eventually. He remembers the name and the face of the supposed Ada Wong that infected and killed his men 6 months prior in Adonia, and he vows to search the woman out, not knowing that she is actually Carla Radamez. As they go, the BSAA saves hostages held by Neo Umbrella, are under constant gunfire, and have to struggle through every corridor they trek down. Even when Chris spots the long MIA Sherry Birkin and Jake Mueller, he makes the call that their BOW elimination is more important than making contact with them, which means finding Ada Wong is more important. As more of the BSAA team starts to die in combat, Chris becomes more unwilling to waver in the mission or to even be flexible. Everything is an order that must be followed, and eventually they do find the woman from 6 years prior, the fake Ada Wong. And as if to really kick in the knife into the old wound of Redfield's loss, her presence lasts as long as it takes to infect one of his men with the C-virus. This time, Chris does act to put down what is left of his old teammate alongside Piers. The two men have a spat after the fact, arguing intentions and using harsh words to prove their points. But in the end, both of them decide to chase down this woman. Leon and Helena also encountered this faux Ada as they drew closer to where Derek Simmons is hiding out, chasing her through a Neo Umbrella warehouse full of weapons and booby traps. Leon intends to bring this Ada Wong into custody to answer for what she is doing here. Because if his own personal experience with Ada has taught him anything, she's extremely easy to take into police custody, isn't she, young man? But Chris Redfield has nearly beat him to this goal, and Chris has no intention of extracting information. He seems rather ready to shoot the woman all to hell. Can't say I blame him, but the Twitter-pated altruism of Leon Kennedy and the blind rage of Chris Redfield bring the two friends into conflict with one another, neither willing to let the other have their way in this regard. Of course, giving the clone ample opportunity to flee the area. In the end, Leon agrees that they will pursue Derek Simmons and Chris will pursue the supposed Ada Wong, with the faith that Chris won't kill the woman on sight, but take her into custody instead. The real Ada Wong has been not too far away from the various groups this whole time in China, finding leads on what's been taking place in Simon's and Carla's camps and occasionally offering assistance to others from the shadows. Like Chris Redfield, her primary goal is this copy, Carla, but surprisingly, Redfield and Pierce managed to beat Ada Wong to their target. Carla is aboard a cargo ship full of military vehicles and weaponry. She intends to launch missiles carrying airborne C-virus into population centers, thus ensuring that containment would be impossible. What an absolutely startling revelation that absolutely nobody could have seen coming. You know what else no one saw coming? A helicopter soundlessly appearing out of nowhere, like a kitten. Presumably a member of the family is acting on behalf of Derek Simmons, and Carla is delivered a fatal shot to the chest from the sniper. So, Chris got his way, but he wasn't the one that shot her. All is well that ends well, right? Well, no. There's still the issue of those missiles. They're not on this cargo ship, but they are nearby and have missiles pointed directly towards mainland China. The real Ada Wong has a moment of words with the dying Carla Radames, bemoaning that Carla just went too far. If she had kept this just about ruining Simmons, then the two could have worked together perhaps. Carla doesn't seem to give a hell about any of this anymore though. She's injected herself with a dose of the C-virus, turning her into a running sludge monster spreading throughout the ship, a surging bag of izits that Ada repeatedly has to pop to make it out safely. Carla is not an issue she cares to address. She's going after Simmons herself now. The BSAA can handle whatever is left over. Meanwhile, back in the city, Leon and Sherry Birkin make contact once more, albeit briefly. And during a confrontation with Derek Simmons, no less, seems the head of the family has no real love for the girl that he once raised. He wants her and Jake Mueller taken into custody, the safeguarding of Jake being the ultimate goal. Perfectly willing to flip on Simmons, Sherry gives Leon information as to why exactly Jake is such a valuable asset, so that even if she fails to deliver him to the US government, knowledge of who and what he is might reach the proper authorities. The two parties split up amongst the gunfire, with Leon and Helena boarding a train to the nearby city of Tachi, occupied by Simmons and his men, and Sherry completing her escort of Jake Mueller to the extraction point. Too bad they missed the spectacle of Derek Simmons getting infected with the C-virus by a random Neo-Umbrella goon that no one in his security detail saw coming. Right to the neck. I wonder what's going to happen to Derek Simmons now. Well, apparently Simmons likes to take his train rides on top of the train. I can't say I blame him. The dosing that he got before boarding was a special batch, extra potent, using the blood of Jake Mueller to enhance the formula, strong enough to burn away his shirt and turn him into a rampaging bioorganic weapon. The real question here being, how did his pants stay intact? Or are butts just that much of a sin? Helena and Leon keep up with the mutated Simmons for a while, but eventually the speeding train is completely derailed over a body of water. While Leon and Helena are able to swim their way out, Simmons is now missing in the city of Tachi. Sherry and Jake don't make it very far at all. Soon after departing from Leon and Helena, they're captured by Neo-Umbrella once again, and this time, they awaken in a massive underwater facility in the ocean large enough to rival that of Rapture. Supposedly an underwater oil field on paper, but Neo-Umbrella evil facility of bad deeds and bioweapons in actuality. Back on the surface, Redfield and Pierce are able to commandeer a jet to attack that missile carrier, but they are not in time to stop the launch of one of the missiles, en route for the nearby city of Tachi, where Leon Kennedy and Helena Harper are now. Chris is able to warn Leon Kennedy moments before the strike, but there's no chance in hell the city can be spared from the C-virus. After making contact with the true Ada Wong, Leon and Helena chase down Derek Simmons in the rapidly declining and ruined city. And calling him hard to kill would certainly be a statement. I'm starting to think that even a rocket launcher wouldn't stand a chance against this level of power creep the viruses are presenting. Simmons is stopped, but we know how these things go, right? And don't you know, Leon? It's never quite as simple as round 1 KO, but oh, our boy Leon has got other things on his mind, namely the real Ada Wong. He's got those Twitter-pated eyes of a smitten man. They follow her copter up to the roof of a skyscraper, or at least that's their intent. Simmons is quite unfinished with his rampage and interrupts their ascent. Ada decides to join the fray in this second phase, assisting Helena and Leon in combating Simmons atop a sky bridge that really can take a beating like a true champion. But Miss Wong has places to be, and at the conclusion of this stage, she gracefully makes her exit and turns her attention towards something that has been on her mind. Though she very sweetly lets Leon know that she left him a little gift on the roof, something he is certainly going to need as this fight with Simmons is far from over. He undergoes one final mutation into something buzzworthy, a giant C-virus fly. And what was the gift Ada left for them? Well, a helicopter and a rocket launcher, so maybe they are still effective at dealing with these situations. I mean, the power of Thor wasn't enough to kill it, but we have traditions to keep with here, folks. A direct shot from the rocket launcher sends the human form of Derek Simmons plunging down the length of the massive building to be impaled on a monument. This is finally the true end of Simmons, and the conclusion of Leon and Helena's part in this tale. They now can depart from the city. But the same cannot be said for Piers, Chris, Jake, and Sherry. Chris and Piers went after the captured Jake and Sherry to the supposed underwater oil field. The two groups do eventually find one another after extensive fights against BOWs all over the station. Everything is fine. No yelling ensues about Albert Wesker. No one discharges a firearm right next to the ear of Chris Redfield, certainly not deafening the man. And Jake is now best buds with Chris Redfield because he knows how to handle his emotions well. And he's understanding and he's empathetic and he's a great young man. Moving on. A massive BOW is held within the facility, a shockingly large one to boot. Chris sends Jake and Sherry out of the fight when the chance presents, acknowledging that Jake Mueller is what will save this world from the C-virus. He has to make it out of this place. Piers and Chris will remain behind to handle the BOW. Sherry and Jake struggle through the facility, encountering the bargain bin C-virus tyrant deployed to hunt down Jake and retrieve him for Neo Umbrella. Their fight is a long, drawn-out one, much the same as the fight Chris and Piers are engaged in. Their BOW is just unstoppable, and in this case, even just fleeing from it is impossible. Chris and Piers hold out against the BOW for as long as possible. They fight valiantly, but it wears them down. Piers is impaled during the combat, and Chris is in the process of being crushed when the younger BSAA agent makes the decision to inject himself with a powerful dose of the C-virus that Carla created. In his last-ditch attempt at stopping the creature, and it is just barely enough to turn the tide, to give Chris the opening he needs to cut the heart out of the thing. If Piers hadn't done this, they both would have died in that room. The destruction of the facility is imminent. While the mutating Piers and Chris Redfield struggle to reach an escape pod, so too do Sherry and Jake struggle in their fight against the bargain bin tyrant. Their best bet is to just find a way out and allow the destruction taking place to kill it. With the power of friendship and two hands holding one gun, they escape the monster as the crumbling oil field ignites. Piers Nivens, though, understands that he does not have much longer. Though his captain insists that everything is going to be okay, and they're going to make it out alive. At the escape pods, Piers sends Chris away alone. Chris Redfield had planned to retire after this mission, to hand off his position of leadership within the BSAA to Piers Nivens, but instead, his goodbye to the young soldier will come during his death. Piers guarantees Chris's safety by attacking the raging BOW one final time, keeping it at the underwater station and sealing its fate when the oil field ignites and takes everything down with it. Ada Wong's final act in this particular tale was destroying what remained of Carla Radama's work when she found her lab. Within, another C-virus monstrosity was readying itself to hatch, but Ada had quite enough of this horror. She left the room in flame, refusing to allow any of it to see the light of day. No one would know about this. It could all just rot here. Jake Mueller's blood was created to use a vaccine for the C virus, eventually snuffing out the threat of infection on a global scale. He and Sherry Birkin parted ways, but they kept in contact as life took them in separate directions. While he still lived as a mercenary of sorts, he instead devoted his energies to being a bit more of a positive force in the world, rather than a cheap gun for hire. He strove to be different, better than his father. Leon Kennedy and Helena Harper were cleared of being involved in the president's murder. Hannigan and Leon did quite a favor to Helena in concealing what she did that night. They would both continue their work in the Division of Security Operations as federal agents fighting against and investigating bioterrorism. Chris Redfield remained with the BSAA after the events in China, becoming as hard-hearted and determined as ever to continue his fight. And there were more outbreaks to come, more horrors to face and viruses to snuff out. But in the year 2017, Chris received a request for cooperation from an organization that he quite distrusted. This would take him to Dulvey, Louisiana, where the terror of a small family would be but a symptom of the things to come.
Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody. Go tell Aunt Rhody that